When I walked into the lawyer's office, I thought this was finally my moment. After a lifetime of sacrifice, I'd at least get what I deserved. But as the will was read, my brother just smirked. "You've always been fine on your own, Ethan. You don't need anything." In that moment, I realized the truth. I was never really part of this family. But if they thought I'd stay and take it, they were dead wrong. This time, I'd be the one walking away. Growing up as the eldest son meant one thing: I had responsibilities. When my father died suddenly, I was only 18. Just a kid, but overnight, I became the man of the house. My mother was too grief-stricken to handle anything, so I stepped in. I worked 2 jobs, put food on the table, and made sure my younger siblings, Ryan and Emily, never felt the weight of our father's absence. I never complained. Not when I had to give up my dream of going to college. Not when I watched Ryan get a brand new car for his 16th birthday, bought with money I helped earn. Not when Emily, the youngest, got a full ride to an out-of-state university, all while I was still clocking in at a dead-end job, making sure the bills were paid. I told myself that's just what big brothers do. That family comes first. But deep down, there was a small voice whispering, "What about me?" That voice only got louder over the years. Every time my mother called, it was never to ask how I was doing. It was to ask for something. A loan. A favor. A last-minute emergency that I was always expected to fix. And I did. Because I was the responsible one. The dependable one. The son who always had it figured out. But the truth? I never figured out a damn thing. I was just surviving. Existing in a life that had been decided for me before I ever had a chance to live it. And now, sitting in that lawyer's office, staring at the will that had erased me completely, I finally understood. I was never their priority. I was just their safety net. Ryan and Emily had lived their lives freely without sacrifice because I had sacrificed everything. And now, they were rewarded for it. They got the house, the savings, everything. Me? I got to sit there and listen while my brother, the same kid I once worked double shifts for just so he could have a prom suit, shrugged and said, "You've always been fine on your own, Ethan. You don't need anything." I looked at my mother's signature at the bottom of the will. She had agreed to this. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. They had taken everything from me already. But what they didn't realize, they couldn't take me. I stood up, slid the chair back without a word, and walked out. And this time, I wasn't looking back. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I was free, but because I finally understood where I stood. There was no place for me in that family. Not in my mother's final wishes, not in my siblings' lives, not even in the home I had spent decades holding together. I had been useful, and now that they didn't need me anymore, they had erased me without a second thought. But if they thought I was going to beg, to fight for scraps, they didn't know me at all. I stepped onto the sidewalk, letting the crisp autumn air fill my lungs. My entire life had revolved around them. Every decision, every sacrifice, every long, grueling shift at jobs I hated. And for what? So Ryan could sip cocktails in his luxury apartment? So Emily could build her perfect little life while I was left behind. Forgotten? Not anymore. I pulled out my phone, ignoring the unread messages from my siblings. Instead, I searched for something I hadn't dared to look at in years: one-way flights. A city I had never been to, a place where no one knew my name. And just like that, my future belonged to me again. But before I tell you what happened next, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been the one who gave everything, only to be left with nothing? If you have, hit that like button, because this story isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been taken for granted. And if you've ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you, drop a broken heart in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because sometimes walking away isn't the hardest part. It's realizing you should have done it sooner. With my decision made, I hailed a cab, tossed my phone into my pocket, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't running toward responsibility. I was running toward freedom. The airport was crowded, the constant hum of conversations and rolling suitcases filling the space around me. I stood in line at the ticket counter, my hand steady, my mind clearer than it had been in years. "One ticket," I said when it was my turn. "Destination?" the agent asked, barely looking up. For a moment I hesitated. I had nowhere to go, but for the first time that wasn't a problem, it was freedom. "Surprise me," I finally said. The agent blinked, then gave me a small smile before scrolling through her screen. "Well, we have a flight to Seattle leaving in 2 hours. One way. You want it. Seattle. A city I'd never been to. A fresh start. I'll take it." As I handed over my ID, I thought about how simple it was to leave. How easy it was to walk away from a life that had never truly been mine. An hour later, I sat by the gate, watching planes take off, one after another, each one carrying people toward new destinations, new lives. Soon I'd be on one of them. No more obligations. No more expectations. No more Ethan, the dependable one, the responsible one. But as I sat there, staring at my boarding pass, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. And again. With a sigh, I pulled it out. "Ryan." I let it ring. Then Emily. Then Ryan again. Finally, a message flashed across my screen. "Pick up. It's important." I debated ignoring it. But some old instinct, the part of me that had spent a lifetime fixing their problems, made me answer. "What?" I said, my voice flat. Ryan's tone was different. Not smug. Not dismissive. This time he sounded desperate. "Ethan, we need your help." I almost laughed. "Of course, they did." The house, he started, but I cut him off. "Not my problem, Ryan." "Listen," he snapped. "We didn't know about the taxes. The repairs. Mom left us everything, but it's a mess. The bills are piling up. Emily and I can't handle it. We thought." "You thought what?" I asked, voice cold. Silence. I let out a breath, shaking my head. "You took everything, Ryan. You and Emily got exactly what you wanted. Now you deal with it. Come on, Ethan. You're good at this stuff. You always figure things out." And there it was. They never wanted me. They wanted what I could do for them. For years, I had been the safety net, the backup plan, the problem solver. And now that they finally had to stand on their own, they couldn't handle it. "Figure it out yourself," I said. "You always land on your feet, right?" I hung up before he could reply. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. My flight was called. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the gate without looking back. For once in my life, I wasn't saving anyone. I was saving myself. Seattle welcomed me with a cold drizzle, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you question why you had ever left home. But for the first time in my life, I didn't have a home to return to. The hotel room was small, just a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking a city I knew nothing about. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the rain-streaked glass. Now what? I had spent so many years living for others that I had no idea what to do when the only person I had to take care of was myself. The first few days passed in a blur. I wandered the streets, ducking into coffee shops to escape the rain, scanning job listings I wasn't sure I even wanted. My whole life had been built around responsibility, fixing problems, carrying burdens. Now, with no one to answer to, I felt weightless in the worst possible way. On the third morning, I found myself at a diner nursing a black coffee when I noticed a help wanted sign in the window. Nothing fancy, just a local place with checkered floors and the smell of burnt toast hanging in the air. I wasn't above washing dishes, or waiting tables, or sweeping floors. Work was work, and for once, I wasn't doing it for anyone else. The owner, a stocky man in his 50s named Mike, eyed me suspiciously when I asked about the job. "You ever worked in a restaurant before?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "You ever had to deal with customers who think they know everything but can't read a damn menu?" That made me smirk. I spent my entire life dealing with people who expected everything and appreciated nothing. Mike let out a laugh. "Sounds like you'll fit right in." And just like that, I had a job. The days turned into weeks. I learned how to balance plates on my arm without dropping them, how to handle customers who thought a 20-minute wait time was a personal insult, how to smile through exhaustion. For the first time, I had no obligations. No guilt. No past clawing at my heels. But every now and then, in the quiet moments between the lunch and dinner rush, I caught myself reaching for my phone, expecting a call that would never come. The truth was, I still hadn't fully let go. Late one night, after the diner had closed, I sat alone at the counter, staring at my untouched cup of coffee. Mike came over, wiping his hands on a rag. "You look like a guy with a lot on his mind." I let out a breath. "Just thinking about family." He nodded knowingly. Yeah, that'll do it. You close with yours? I asked. Used to be, he said. Until I realized closeness isn't the same as love. That hit harder than I expected. So what did you do? I asked. Mike shrugged. Walked away. Built my own life. Never looked back. I stirred my coffee absent-mindedly. Was it worth it? Mike leaned against the counter. I get to wake up every morning knowing that the life I have is mine. No one's using me. No one's expecting me to carry them. No one's waiting for me to fail so they can feel better about themselves. So yeah, it was worth it. For the first time since I left, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had made the right choice. But just as I was starting to settle into this new life, a phone call shattered the fragile peace I had built. Ryan. I stared at the screen as it rang. My pulse didn't quicken. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. But I answered anyway. And the moment I did, I knew something was wrong. Ryan's voice wasn't cocky this time. It wasn't demanding. It was broken. Ethan, we need to talk. The weight of those words settled in my chest like a stone. Because if Ryan was reaching out again after everything, it could only mean one thing. Something had gone terribly wrong. I should have hung up. I should have ignored the call, let it go to voicemail, and kept living the life I was finally building for myself. But old habits die hard. What do you want, Ryan? I asked, my voice flat. For a moment, all I could hear was his breathing. Then his voice, lower than I'd ever heard it, came through the line. It's Emily. A beat of silence. She's in trouble, Ethan. Real trouble. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Of course she was. What kind of trouble? The house, he admitted. It's gone. The words didn't hit me the way he probably expected them to. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't anything. Gone? I repeated. Foreclosed. The bank took it. I let out a humorless chuckle. The house that was supposed to be their reward. The house they stole out from under me. The house they thought would be their golden ticket. And whose fault is that? I asked. We didn't know, Ryan started, but I cut him off. No, Ryan. You didn't care. That's the difference. He let out a shaky breath. Emily didn't tell me things were this bad. She took out loans against the house, trying to cover everything. When she couldn't keep up, they took it. Now she's drowning in debt and I don't know what to do. I rubbed my temple. The irony was suffocating. They had everything handed to them and they still found a way to ruin it. So why are you calling me? Because she needs help, Ethan. And you're the only one who's ever been able to fix things. The sheer audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Ryan, I said, my voice eerily calm, you and Emily made your choice. You shut me out, took everything, and expected me to disappear. So why the hell would you think I'd help you now? His voice cracked. Because despite everything, you're still our brother. I didn't respond right away. Because I wasn't sure if that was even true anymore. I don't owe you anything, I finally said. Not anymore. I know, Ryan admitted. But Emily, she was Mom's favorite, yeah. She always got what she wanted. But she's never had to do this alone before. She's not strong like you, Ethan. She never was. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to push away the headache forming behind my eyes. Where is she? At Mom's old lawyer's office. She's trying to negotiate, but it's bad. I could have said no. I should have said no. But despite everything, a part of me still wanted to see how this ended. I'll think about it, I said. Then I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. And then, without fully knowing why, I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out the door. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't over yet. The lawyer's office looked exactly as I remembered it, cold, impersonal, filled with the scent of old paper and polished wood. Emily sat in one of the leather chairs by the window, hunched over, gripping a folder so tightly her knuckles were white. When she looked up and saw me, her face crumpled. Ethan. Her voice was small, the confidence and entitlement she'd always carried stripped away. I didn't say anything. I just sat across from her, arms crossed, waiting. The lawyer, a stiff-looking man in a gray suit, barely glanced at me before turning his attention back to Emily. As I was saying, Ms. Walker, the bank has already processed the foreclosure. Your outstanding debt exceeds the property's value, which means you'll still owe a. I know what it means, she snapped, then immediately deflated, dropping her head into her hands. I watched her for a moment, trying to summon even a shred of sympathy. But all I felt was exhaustion. So what exactly do you want from me? I asked, breaking the silence. Emily lifted her head. Her eyes that had once looked at me with dismissal, with superiority, were now pleading. I don't know what to do, Ethan, she admitted, her voice shaking. Mom always took care of everything. Then it was you. I never had to. She swallowed hard. I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong. I exhaled slowly. You made sure I had no place in this family, I said, my voice steady. You and Ryan both. You got what you wanted, and now that it's all fallen apart, you suddenly remember I exist. Emily flinched but didn't argue. Ethan, please, she whispered. I don't have anywhere else to go. I stared at her, searching for something real in her desperation. Was it regret? Remorse? Or was this just another way to use me? I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. You had a home, I said quietly. You had a brother who would have done anything for you. And you threw it away. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. I stood up. Then live with it. I turned and walked away, leaving her there, just like they had left me. Outside, the air was sharp and fresh. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with something that finally felt like freedom. For the first time, I wasn't running toward them. I wasn't running away from them either. I was just moving forward. The Forgotten Son isn't just a story about betrayal, it's a story about self-worth, about realizing when it's time to stop carrying the weight of people who wouldn't do the same for you. It's about breaking free from the cycle of obligation, learning that family isn't just about blood, and understanding that sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. Ethan spent his whole life putting others first, believing that if he just gave enough, if he just worked hard enough, he would earn a place in his own family. But in the end, he learned the hardest lesson of all: some people will only value you for what you can give them, not for who you are. And when that happens, you have two choices: keep playing the role they've written for you, or walk away and start writing your own story. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you gave everything only to be left with nothing? If this story resonated with you, drop a 2 in the comments. If you think Ethan should have handled things differently, comment 7. I'd love to hear your perspective. And before you go, if you enjoy powerful stories like this, stories that make you think, make you feel, hit that like button so more people can see it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Because sometimes the most powerful endings are new beginnings.